Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, Assistant Sports Editor for Multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Joined for our weekly chat with Jason Mackey, Post-Gazette sports columnist. Jason, we've got a lot to get to today. Are the Steelers in rebuilding mode? And people are just in denial about that inside the organization, outside the organization. Should that frame how we view them? We're going to get into that conversation, talk a little bit about the game in Ireland. In the second segment, we're going to get to some hockey, talk about this Four Nations Faceoff that Sidney Crosby, Mike Sullivan, some other Penguins are involved in. Are you watching? Do you care? We're going to toss that back and forth. And then the third segment, we will talk about the Pirates offseason, the lack of moves, the Spencer Horwitz injury that makes the lack of moves more profound. Maybe get into some breaking news from the first couple of days of Pirates camp. That segment is going to air on our Post-Gazette Sports Pirates YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed to that yet, head on over, check that out. It's youtube.com/@PGPirates. So subscribe there if you want to see that segment. Jason, let's get into it with the Steelers here after he read for Edgar Snyder and Associates. This show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder and Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. For over 40 years, Edgar Snyder has helped injury victims answer that question, whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies. Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle what's next. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Jason, Ray Fittipaldo in his weekly chat on postgazette.com made a comment that's made some waves in the Steelers blogosphere on social media, saying that the Steelers are in rebuilding mode, whether they realize it or not. He wouldn't be surprised if they had a losing record next season. What say you to the notion that this team is rebuilding or should see itself as rebuilding, whether it does or not?
Well, Adam, I mean, what it should see itself as and what the Steelers are actually doing, I think, are two separate things. I mean, should the Steelers rebuild? Yeah, probably. Right now, they're caught in between, and I don't think there's anything that's going to push them to elite levels, and I don't think there's going to be anything that pushes them to the bottom. Is it better to, I don't know, go 5-12 or whatever, and then get the top 10 pick that would lead to a quarterback and Ben Roethlisberger's true successor or whatever? An argument could be made there. I look at the NFL and I see teams, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a whole heck of a lot. So, yeah, but I don't think that's what they're doing. I mean, I think they're grasping to things, and now we're seeing Aaron Rodgers linked to them, and they signed Russell Wilson last year. And, I mean, it seems like they are trying so desperately to grab on to 10-7, 9-8 mediocrity when probably it's better to sink to the bottom. So, I mean, I don't know. We can talk about what they want to do, what they should do. They're not the same thing to me.
Yeah, well, to me, when you still have guys like TJ Watt, when you re-sign Cam Heyward, when you have Minkah Fitzpatrick on the team, when that's your core of players on defense, I think you're in win now mode until those guys are gone, until you've collected some draft capital for them. When I think of a rebuilding team, Jason, I think of the Pirates when they stripped down to nothing a few years ago and then started building back up. I think of the Penguins of the early aughts who were tearing down and then ended up loading back up with Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin. The Steelers are not in that zone for me until they start moving some of these guys. And maybe they do this offseason, but if they don't, then I think the onus is still on Coach Mike Tomlin, GM Omar Khan, to make this team, as good as it can be. And I think that begins the question of, what should they be doing and how should they view the situation? Is it hopeless with this core of players? It seems like they don't think that it is.
Yeah, I mean, they think they can win. I think a lot of people on the outside are going to disagree with that. But, you wouldn't handle TJ Watt the way they're handling TJ Watt if you were thinking about rebuilding, right, Adam? I mean, you said this a little bit, but you would trade him and try to mortgage that into draft picks. You could get a lot for TJ Watt. The fact that you're holding him here and you value his career as a Steeler or whatever, that tells me that you're better with him than without him. At least that's what you think. We'll see what they do at quarterback. I mean, at this point, I know it's crazy, but you don't sign Aaron Rodgers if you're rebuilding, right? Unless you're trying to accelerate that, which would be kind of a weird move. You don't sign Russell Wilson if you're rebuilding. They need to be stockpiling draft picks and getting younger and doing all these things. And I just don't see those moves being made right now. I mean, they're addressing some things via the draft, but I don't know. If you compare it to where the Penguins were, like you're saying, where the Pirates were, they're just a long way off from that. Even from a team like the Philadelphia Eagles that we saw in the Super Bowl, all of the things that they did, I don't think the Steelers are far enough down that road. So, yeah, I mean, this goes back to the same thing, Adam. I wish their actions were different. I wish their actions said that we're going to, I mean, shoot, even their actions to like, we're going to be elite right now and go out and get a Brandon Ayuk. Not that it would have worked out, but I'm talking about the process, go out and get elite players for now. Even that's not happening. Like I see them as being very much in that mushy middle.
Let's talk about the quarterback situation and how you'd view the different moves they can make. I think there's an argument to be made that if you sign Justin Fields, you're doing so with an eye toward the future, that you're going to, continue to develop him, and hopefully he gets, by the time he's in his late 20s, really that prime for quarterbacks, that he's ready to do the things that we're seeing from Jalen Hurts and some of these other quarterbacks. But I could also see the argument that if you're looking toward the future, you could sign a Russell Wilson back, or you could sign an Aaron Rodgers with the idea that neither of them are going to be here for very long. You're not going to have to make a big long-term commitment. It gives you flexibility going into any draft in terms of who's available, where you're picking. How do you view how, the question of rebuilding informs that quarterback conversation?
It does. And I think it makes the most sense, no matter what they do, Adam, to go with Justin Fields. I don't know if a rebuild or a non-rebuild changes my opinion on that. I don't see a point in signing an aging veteran quarterback who might have something. I would much rather take the youthful approach. I think you save money. I think you spend money, spend your cap dollars other places. Like right now, I look at the Steelers, and this aligns with what I was saying before, that they're not far enough along where they're at. Like, you need to take some of those dollars. And I'll just speak in real numbers because I think it's easier to understand. If you're going to spend $30 million on Russell Wilson, I would rather spend 15 on Justin Fields and take that other 15 and go buy a wide receiver, because I think they're that deficient in that department. So it's not a direct way of answering the question, but I think that Justin Fields, one, gives you just enough of the production of any other guy or anybody else who would be available. What I worry about, Adam, is can they get Justin Fields? Is Justin Fields attracted enough to Pittsburgh to want to sign here? I've been trying to look at this through Justin Fields' perspective, and if I'm him, I'm not sure I'm signing with the Steelers right now. I'm at least going to free agency on March 12th and saying, all right, who else wants to pay me? Anybody else want to give me some money? Because I don't see enough from Arthur Smith. I don't know if I see enough from the commitment from the team. I mean, if they're out there flirting with Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers or who knows who else, I want to hear a plan for how I'm going to be used. If I'm Justin Fields, again, I'm one of the most heralded quarterbacks on the free agent market. I can go there and find out what I can get. And I have a feeling the market might be a little bit different for him this time around.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a layup for the Steelers. And remember, they did trade for him too, so he never really has hit the market before. So maybe there's a part of him that just wants to, test that. What part does the offensive line play in this, Jason? Because I look at that group and say, you have the pieces in place, at least you hope and think that you have the pieces in place where that group is going to mature. You don't have to, or you shouldn't have to invest, a ton more capital in building that group. And then so do you really punt on having that group gelling together at the same time? Or do you hope that, next season at this time, if you have that same group and you don't have some of these catastrophic injuries they had in 2024, that's gelling into a pretty good group and changes this conversation on offense somewhat regardless of where the skill players are?
Yeah, I mean, I sure hope so. And I heard a lot of that this season, feedback and frustration over the offensive line. And I get it, but I think that group is very much incomplete, Adam. And I think you'll probably agree with this. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of change going into next year. What I mean by that is Broderick Jones shifting over to the left side. That's his natural position. That's where he should be playing. They've kind of been hamstrung with Dan Moore over there. I expect Dan Moore to leave via free agency. He doesn't play the right side. So, okay, you get Troy Fautanu back on the right side. You move Broderick Jones over to the left. That should be immediate improvement. I did like what they got from Mason McCormick at right guard. I think it can be good enough. I don't know if I would entertain the idea of bringing a James Daniels back. I might look to further upgrade the guard spot just a little bit, but another year of experience with Mason McCormick, Zach Frazier, again, getting Fautanu back, getting Broderick Jones over to the left side. That's how the line should be aligned. Whether or not you agree with the idea of bringing Pat Meyer back, I know there's been criticism out there of that. I've heard from people who want Mike Munchak back. I get it. I just don't think we've seen the best that this group has to offer.
Yeah, I still like them, and they're still. I mean, they're both first and second. Most of these guys we're talking about are first and second year players, and
in high round picks, Adam. They invested capital in these guys.
Yeah, so I'm still optimistic about those guys. I think Broderick Jones is obviously the one you're most concerned about. But to your point, you got to see him on the left side before you know how that situation is going to play out. Jason, Ray said he wouldn't be surprised if they had a losing record next season. Let me read off to you their non-division opponents and tell me how you feel about the question of whether they're going to have a winning record next year or not as constituted, or just assume they make the moves we expect them to make, Justin Fields, those types of things. Bears, Lions, Chargers, Patriots, Jets, Bills, Dolphins, Packers, Vikings, Colts, Seahawks. I see 4 losses for sure from that group. Obviously, Lions, Bills, Packers, Vikings, and then there's a whole bunch of other teams that seem to be in that mushy middle. How do you see the Steelers performing against them, barring some, unforeseen big development?
I see a podcast host that read that list entirely too fast for an old man. Come on, slow down. Can we go a little bit at a time here?
All right, let's go a little slower. Bears.
I'm going to go with a win.
Lions, we said loss. Chargers.
I'm going to go with the loss this time, 1-2.
Patriots.
Win, 2-2.
Jets.
Win, 3-2.
Bills. I think we both agree that's probably a loss.
Yep.
Dolphins.
Win.
Packers and Vikings, I think, would be 2 losses.
I'll give them a split there. They're going to win one game that they shouldn't. I'm going to give them a split.
And then Colts, Seahawks.
I'm going to give them a split there, too.
So I think that leaves us at 500, and then that leaves the whole season up to how you play in the division.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about the same thing, Adam. We're talking about 9-8. We're talking about 10-7. We're talking about 8-9. Like, those are the differences here. They're not exciting. It feeds into the first topic. Are they rebuilding? No, they're not rebuilding. They're just doing the same stuff over and over again, which is maddening for people. I would rather see them rebuild. I would rather see them bottom out and then eventually rise. I think there's more to be gained from that rather than clinging to what we're talking about. 500 out of the division, maybe 500 or a little bit better in the division. And who are you going to threaten?
True. Yeah, exactly. And Jason, I think this next question, because we're going to wrap up the Steelers conversation here, I think this is somewhat relevant to the rebuilding conversation of we saw a lot of blowback, more blowback than I was expecting to the announcement that the Steelers will be playing a regular season game in Ireland next season. People making the argument that the Steelers are focused on the wrong things organizationally. They're focused on these big events, going to Ireland, hosting the draft in 2026. I don't agree with that at all, to be honest with you, Jason. I look at this game and say, listen, they haven't played internationally in a long time. Most of these other teams have been getting shipped overseas once a year and just going to the locations the NFL tells them to. The Steelers seem to have the benefit of having picked out exactly the situation they want to be in, where they want to grow the fan base, a country, because I was there in 2014 with Penn State. It's probably one of the countries outside America that's most predisposed to liking football. And I feel like even though it's a small country, you can develop a fan base there if you take the team over there. This seems like purposeful, thoughtful, and growing the brand in a way that should help the team. What's your reaction to the somewhat negative response they've gotten to this game?
It is misplaced fan anger, Adam. I mean, come on. I honestly have not seen a lot of that blowback, but I mean, that's all it is. If your reaction to this is anything other than, hey, that's cool, maybe we'll go to Ireland. That sounds fun. They were going to play over there anyway. Like, to think that the Steelers aren't winning football games because they're too focused on the draft or too focused on playing in Ireland Give me a break. Like that doesn't make sense. It's a gigantic organization. There are other parts of it. I mean, even by NFL standards, like, no, that's just impossible to me. I find it ridiculous. They were going to play over there. The NFL is going to grow its product internationally. The Steelers were going to play somewhere. I'm with you. I'm surprised it took this long. I kind of thought it might be Mexico City. I think they'll get there eventually. But of all the places the Steelers could play, I think Ireland makes a ton of sense. The Rooney ties there. I get it. I'm looking forward to the trip. I think it's going to be a great opportunity. It was inevitable. Like I said, the NFL is not going to stop from growing its product. Wouldn't surprise me if they had a team overseas at some point. But, thinking that the Steelers are somehow diverting attention from football games and from the on-field product because of the draft and playing in Ireland, come on. They've made bad decisions, but it's not a lack of attention or a lack of focus.
Well, and the draft is one of those things that if they weren't hosting it, we'd be having the exact conversation of people wanting to know when the Steelers are going to get their turn to host it. So, I mean, it's happening. Relax.
You just can't pay attention to that stuff. You can't. Yeah. I mean, it's people who are mad about the Steelers, which is fine. They have every right to be channeling it in a way that does not make sense.
I agree, Jason. All right, we're going to get into some hockey on the other side of this break, talk about this Four Nations Faceoff. Before we do, just want to thank our friends over at the Bradenton Tourism Board. Here is a message from them.
Embrace the laid-back charm of island life while sinking your toes in the sand and discovering real, authentic Florida in the Bradenton area. Unspoiled beauty and pristine beaches, a vibrant waterfront downtown energized by local arts and culture, fresh Floridian cuisine with a flourish of rich history, and friendly locals ready to welcome you to this preserved paradise on Florida's Gulf Coast. Plan your visit today at BradentonGulfIslands.com.
All right, Jason, we are back. You and I, Adam Bittner, talking about the Penguins, the Four Nations Face-Off, their involvement with it. Before we get too far into that, I'm just going to need you to convince me that this whole thing was not contrived so that Connor McDavid could win something.
Oh, come on. No, it isn't, but I appreciate the Connor McDavid shade throwing. No, it wasn't contrived. And the NHL has long needed this, Adam. And here's my convincing argument. The 2016 World Cup of Hockey was the last time they had a best-on-best tournament. I would be all in favor of NHL players going to the Olympics, and I have been in favor of them going to the Olympics. They haven't been. And if you watched the game last night, I thought it was fantastic. The pace, the skill, and we're only going to see more of it. It's going to be very exciting. You saw Sidney Crosby dominating. The crowd in Montreal was fantastic. I want more of this. My only criticism of the Four Nations, Adam, is that it's only 4 teams. I'd like to see Team Europe, Team International, Young Stars, get Russia involved, something like that. Like, I just don't think it's big enough. I understand why, they're sort of starting small and then growing it. The World Cup of Hockey is coming back in 2028. Gary Bettman made that announcement last night. It's fantastic. It's best for the sport. Seeing this level of competition, the players who drive your sport, and we can take shots at Connor McDavid, and yes, it's funny because he's sort of a rival of Sid and hasn't really won anything, but I mean, he's still a face of the sport. He's somebody people who are going to tune in to and watch, and Nathan McKinnon, the same deal, and obviously Sid and Team Canada's fun, but Sweden's no slouch. Finland's no slouch. Team USA is no slouch. There's a lot of skill on the ice, and I'm telling you, man, even if you're not a big hockey person, watch this stuff. You're going to love it. It's entertaining. It's high stakes. Fans are into it. It's the closest thing to playoff hockey we're going to have around here in a while, sad as it is to say.
I want to get more into McDavid and kind of the marketing of this event in a minute. But Jason, you mentioned the small field. I think that's why it lacks weight for me. What does it prove to me if Canada wins in a 4-team tournament against these 3 teams? If there's no Russians there, if there's no Czech players there, that's where I think I struggle with it. Is it? Yeah, it could be good.
I mean,
hockey,
it's still 75% of the best players in the world, Adam. I mean, that's still pretty good.
Yeah, I feel like a bigger field gives it more weight. I look at the Olympics. How many teams do you have in the Olympics? And yes, some of them are blowouts, but it's a longer process. The way things play out, it's over the 2 weeks. And it just feels like a bigger event than this, where it just feels kind of like, it kind of feels like a home run derby to me. there's a lot of skill in that. It's skill we don't see during, the regular season, but it just feels kind of like an exhibition to me more than something that really means anything.
You know what the NHL is doing here, though, that other pro sports leagues should try to emulate? It's finding a way to take its all-star festivities and make them meaningful. I hate all-star games. I'm over it. I think it's stupid. I wish you could wedge some sort of competition in there. Like, is the Four Nations perfect? Absolutely not. There are flaws, and I agree with most of what you're saying. But you know what they're doing? They're taking this time period and giving us something to watch and care about, and I'm thankful for that.
Jason, I want to talk about the marketing, because I don't know if you've seen the marketing image going around where it's got the three captains, the American captain, Finnish captain, Swedish captain, and then it has Connor McDavid slid in there. He's all over the league's marketing all the time. He's the number one guy you're focusing. The guy to me has A, 1-0, B, has a sourpuss, 0 riz whatsoever.
Did you just say 0 riz?
I did.
How old are you? 0 riz?
He just doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. And then you have that he plays his games at 10 p.m. most of the time. Why is the NHL so invested in this guy in particular, and at the expense of, I'll throw in Sid Novi here. It feels like both of them have been pushed to the side, despite the fact that Sidney Crosby is still playing at a very high level, had a great game last night against Sweden. And it's almost like this Ovechkin pursuit of Wayne Gretzky, which should be the biggest thing that's happened in the sport, possibly in my life, has almost become a sideshow from a marketing perspective. And it's kind of like the league doesn't care, even if fans do, because Ovi's a guy they've watched for 20 years.
Well, it's a Canadian-dominated game. Remember that. And the NHL marketing machine is a lot of Canada. And so I think that's why you see the McDavid hype. I will agree with you. I think McDavid could stand to be a little bit more interesting, accessible, whatever. Quick story from my time on the beat. I remember going to Edmonton. This was their first time in their new rink. And we go into the Oilers locker room, and everybody wants to talk to Connor McDavid about Sid or whatever. And they usher Connor McDavid in. He talks for 2 minutes. It's barely audible. There's 40 people in the room, and he's like whispering, and then he's ushered out of the room. Contrast that with Sidney Crosby, who will sit around the Penguins practice facility for 30 minutes and talk to anybody about anything at any time, and is the most accessible superstar on the planet. They're vastly different personalities. But you brought up a couple points there. And I mean, the NHL has long, I think, had a problem with always feeling like it has to emphasize the new thing. The young guys, they're here. And so Connor McDavid fits that mold. Now, he's a very exciting player on the ice. You watch Connor McDavid play hockey, it's incredible. And I understand why you would want to market something around him, especially in a big-time Canadian market. Like, no, Edmonton is not Toronto. It's not Montreal. But like in Alberta, man, people care about, that's all they have out there. And they want the Oilers to be good. And the Oilers have been exciting. And it's a cool storyline. So they're going to push it. I agree with you that Alex Ovechkin has not gotten the shine that he deserves for chasing Wayne Gretzky's goal. I mean, maybe because people don't want to see it happen. I don't know. I mean, I'm hypothesizing there. But they have long sought the next big thing. And yeah, sometimes it is an uninteresting Canadian kid that it happens with.
Yeah, well, and I don't have a problem highlighting young players, but you give me someone who's got some flair to their game, that's got some.
Well, he has flair to his game, Adam. McDavid has a ton of flair to his game.
I guess I'm talking about flash. It's
here's my issue.
I'll take their coverage a little bit and do some cooler things on the ice than you expect them to. Sure. Just I'm trying to articulate here. There's just not a lot of personalities either. I look at I grew up with like Jeremy Roenick, Brett Hull, and there was a little bit of an edge to them and some hateability factor there that some of these younger guys they just all seem kind of the same to me.
This has long been a criticism of mine, and this is somebody who, don't get me wrong, I love hockey. I love covering hockey. I believe in the sport. I want people to care about the sport. The NHL does not do nearly a good enough job marketing its stars. Look at the NBA. Look at the NFL. Like, those leagues are what they are for a reason. They know how to shine a spotlight on the best players. The NHL is getting better at that. I will give them that. But it's nowhere near where it should be. And even Major League Baseball isn't good enough with that sort of stuff. Like, I would be having McDavid out there a ton. I have no problem with them pushing McDavid. I think he plays the type of game that it's an easy entry point in. And even McKinnon and Sid and Ovechkin and so many more players, and Cale Makar, and you can go down the list. You should be accentuating that. You should be selling your stars, but it is just the opposite of kind of how hockey was built and the culture around the sport, to single out individual players and talk about the stuff that I think, resonates with fans the most, them doing incredible things.
Jason, I know you wrote a column about Mario, who was involved in the festivities before the Four Nations game on Wednesday night. Do you want to tease that at all on postgazette.com?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote it. I filed it a little bit before we got on this podcast, but I was watching that game last night and seeing Mario at center ice with Sid, and it just hit me right in the feels, man. Like, that stuff should be happening here. Mario should be thought of and considered, and he is one of the most important people in Pittsburgh sports history. Obviously the most important in Penguins history. Like, this franchise would not be here if not for him. And there's, a rift and awkwardness and iciness and however you want to describe it with Mario and Fenway Sports Group. And I don't care how we got here, whether it's because of the sale, the lawsuit, Mario feeling like he's not involved, like they don't care about him, if it's financial, whatever. I do not care. That problem needs to be fixed. And that's the point of my column. FSG purchased a hockey team here in the city. It also made sort of a pact or an agreement with the fans of that team. And part of that involves Mario Lemieux being around Penguins games. And Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, they're going to be gone before too long. And what happens when they're gone, when Mario's gone? What do we have left? I want Mario and Sid. And I know Mario is his own animal. He's not going to be there, soaking up the spotlight and saying me, me, me. But there are things to be had. There are events where you can put him and Sid together. Mario needs to be an important part of this team. We need, as a city, as a fan base, to be able to see him attached to the Penguins, and that's on FSG. FSG needs to figure that out. I don't care how it gets done. I don't care how we got here. But it's like, having a spat with your best friend, Adam, or even your wife or something like that. You say, oh, the door's always open. They're always welcome. It's not good enough, man. It's not good enough. You need to take that extra step and make things right with somebody who means so much to sports fans in the city.
Well, last season, Jason, I think the most interesting thing that happened to the team was Jagerstock. When he was here for 2 weeks, going to every game, a visible presence, had the awesome jersey retirement ceremony. The Penguins have kind of held the jersey retirements as this very, very high bar of literally it's just been Lemieux and Jágr. I wonder if you shouldn't have a little bit more of that and have some of these personalities from the past, to the point that we've been making about making hockey interesting on a personality level. Yeah. Get more of those guys involved. It's not as if the Penguins don't have them in their history.
I mean, Fleury's going to retire. What are we going to do with him? Another French Canadian. Is he going to be welcome back? Perfect opportunity to have Mario out there. Clearly Mario would have some thoughts, and he doesn't have to talk all the time, and he's not going to talk all the time. But yes, I mean, I agree with you. Celebrate history, celebrate nostalgia. Honestly, it's going to be a couple kind of slow years here. I hope it's not too long. I hope they can do this quickly, but leaning into nostalgia and what you had before and honoring legacies is probably a pretty good idea if you want to engender some positivity right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there is definitely a line. I think the Pirates indulge way too much in that type of stuff. So I don't think the Penguins should just hollow out the concept of nostalgia, but I think they can lean into it a little bit more than they have to this point. Jason, you and I are going to talk baseball next. If you're on the audio feed, stay tuned. Nothing's going to change for you. If you're on YouTube, click off this video, go over to Post-Gazette Pirates on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and our video will be there. If not immediately, then shortly after this video airs. Trying to get some support over there for Noah Hiles, Andrew Destin. So check everything out over there. We will be right back on audio, and for everyone else, we'll talk to you on the other channel.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.